You are listening to the Makers Church podcast. For more information about our community, please visit makerschurch.org.
Awesome. Good morning. Well, if we haven't met before, my name is Shalise, and I'm one of the pastors here at Makers Church. And I have the incredible privilege of getting to share with you today. A few weeks ago, Mark Wallace was talking about this verse that was kind of rattling around in his head. And he had that thought of like, why am I thinking about that? You ever had that thought where you're like, why do I keep thinking about this? And I looked at him and I was like, Mark, I've had the same thing. I was like, somewhere in Scripture, which is a really great phrase to say when you're a pastor. You're like, somewhere in the Bible. I'm pretty sure somewhere it says this. I heard it once. But I was like, I know that there's this passage of text that talks about horses. And I was like, I got to find that passage of text because for whatever reason, it's been rumbling around in my head and in my heart, and I found it. Woo! Great success. So today, I wanted to take this opportunity to share with you just something that God has been stirring on my heart. I didn't have language for it until I realized and I could start to see the connections that God was making. So if you want to join me, we're going to go into James 3. James 3 says this: not many of you should become teachers. I'm already in trouble twice because I'm a high school English teacher. And I'm like, preach it, James. Amen. Do not become a teacher, but Thanksgiving break is coming. And then 3 weeks later, it is Christmas. And then it's a long haul till spring break. So not many of you should become teachers, my fellow believers, because you know that we who teach will be judged more strictly. We all stumble in many ways. Anyone who is never at fault in what they say is perfect, able to keep their whole body in check. When we put bits into the mouths of horses to make them obey us, we can turn the whole animal. Or take ships as an example. Although they are so large and are driven by strong winds, they are steered by a very small rudder wherever the pilot wants to go. Likewise, the tongue is a small part of the body, but it makes great boasts. Consider what a great forest is set on fire by a small spark. The tongue also is a fire, a world of evil among the parts of the body. It corrupts the whole body, sets the whole course of one's life on fire, and is itself set on fire by hell. Woo, so that's what was going on in my mind. And I was thinking about this a few weeks ago. My husband took me on a mystery date. Now, mystery dates are something my dad started when I was little. And my dad would walk into the house and he would say, get in the car. And I was like, done, let's go. And it usually involved ice cream or donuts or something we weren't allowed to tell my mom that we were eating. But I loved mystery dates. And so my husband says, hey, we're going on a mystery date. Get in the car, let's go. And I was like, no, where are we going? I'm too old now. I need details. Like, is this going to be enjoyable for me? But he said, I'm taking you on a mystery date. And I said, great, I'm excited. So he took me to the Birch Aquarium, which I was really excited about, especially since I had been dropping hints for months about how I would love to go to the aquarium. Babe, wouldn't it be so nice to go to the aquarium? Wink, wink. And I was really excited because there was this new exhibit for sea dragons. And I was like, I don't know what a sea dragon is, but I'm in. So we go, and it turns out that sea dragons are just like sea horses that have undergone some weird mutations and have really weird things like limbs and extremities and wings, all this crazy, crazy stuff. And we see this sea dragon that looks like seaweed. It has like seaweed flowing off of it. It was majestic. And I'm walking around the aquarium just like so in awe of all the different types of fish. And I was like, fish are like people. Like, we're all so weird and different. And some of us have weird things hanging off of our bodies, and it's okay because it's beautiful. And so we go to the aquarium, and they said, hey, at noon, you can watch the sharks eat. And I was like, yes, I'm in. Like, throw the children in. No, I'm just kidding. So we go to watch the sharks eat, and they throw chum in, and then the fish go wild. They go crazy. And so we're standing by the glass, and they drop this big piece of fish in. And all of a sudden, you ever like audibly gasped and then realized you're in public? And you're like, oh, I'm cool. I'm sitting there, and this huge fish like pops up from under the sand, grabs this thing, and goes back into the sand. And I was like, oh, no. See, this is why we don't go in the ocean. It is terrifying. It's not even the fish in the water. It's the ones like burrowed under the sand. And I was like, nope, thank you. And my husband goes, oh, that's a flounder. And I was like, no, I've seen The Little Mermaid. That is not a flounder. Like, this was a very ugly fish. And he's like, yeah, no, babe, that's a flounder. And I was like, my whole childhood is a lie. Great. And so I noticed this fish, and Drew, my husband, points out, he goes, yeah, can you see, like, it lays on the sand, and it has both eyes on one side of its head. And I was like, what a weirdo. Like, you have two eyes on one side of your head? And so I was fascinated. I'm like, how is that possible? Like, were you just born that way? And so I do some research, and I find out that the flounder fish is actually not born that way. Even though all flounder fish have two eyes on the side of their head. When they're actually hatched, they have one eye on each side of their head. And then they realize that the ocean is terrifying and a very scary place, not safe for them. And so they live on the bottom, on the surface of the ocean. And because nature and God is incredible, through a process of metamorphosis as they grow, eventually that eye moves to the other side of their head. And I was like, you weird little fish. Like, that is insane that you, in order to protect yourself, you spend so much time on the bottom of the ocean that your body's like, well, I guess this is just happening. Might as well move over to the other side. And now this fish has two eyes on one side of its head. And it got me thinking, I wonder the ways that I've changed in my life to protect myself. Like the things that I do over and over and over again, where eventually my body's like, okay, I mean, I guess this is just what we do now when we feel threatened or when we feel like we're in danger. See, we all do these things. They're called defense mechanisms, right? When we are confronted with that thing that we don't like, it's the way that we respond to those parts of ourselves and others that we don't understand, things that we don't like to admit, things that maybe hurt us or have wounded us. And so we protect ourselves. And we do these things, and we push things down, and we ignore it, and we deflect. But all this does is eventually cause us to become something that we don't even recognize anymore. See, I know a lot of times for me in my own life, when I've been confronted with parts of myself that I don't like, I just kind of ignore it in hopes that it'll eventually go away. I'm like, oh, I'll grow out of that. And then you turn 36 and you're like, I'm still growing out of that. That's fine. And you just keep kind of pushing it down and pushing it down and pushing it away out of fear of what other people might think, especially in the church. You know that's true, right? This is not always a safe space to admit what you're struggling with, to admit the things that have hurt you, to admit how you are actually feeling. But one of my ultimate favorite verses of all time is Ephesians 5:13. And this verse came to me at a time when I really needed it, and it has stuck with me ever since. And it says this, it says, but everything exposed by the light becomes visible, and everything that is illuminated becomes a light. See, what this verse means is that when we bring our darkness into the light, our darkness actually becomes a light. When we bring those parts of us that we're struggling with, or those things that we feel like we should hide away, when we bring those to the light, when we expose them, they actually become a light. They light the way not just for us, but for others. I love this verse. It's so empowering. It means that every single thing in my life that the enemy would want to use against me, to use for evil, to use to isolate me and keep me separate from others, that God can actually use that he can turn it into light. But that is a very scary and vulnerable process. It is not easy to talk about those dark things, those woundings. Drew and I were at Fernside in South Park on Friday having a date night, and I was sharing with him what I was going to talk about. And he said, yeah, I really resonate with that. And he started opening up to me about just the struggles that he's had with anxiety and depression. And he says, you know, it's so hard because I don't like those parts about me. He's like, I don't like that there's this thing that I can't control. It's like I don't like the narrative that it sometimes creates where people are just like, well, just get over it. He's like, yeah, okay. It's not quite how anxiety works, but sure. Right? And I looked at him, I was like, babe, I'm so proud of you because every time that I've seen Drew talk to people about his anxiety and his depression, people that are struggling with the same thing, you can see like a lightness come to them. You can see them go, oh, I'm not alone. Like this is such a powerful, powerful gift that my husband has to be able to step into some of those dark spaces. And so what I want to do today is maybe bring to light some of our defense mechanisms in hopes that they would then become light. We've been in a series for the past 10 weeks. We wrapped it up last week called Know Thyself. And we were doing a character study through the lens of the Enneagram. And I'm so obsessed with the Enneagram that I just decided we're going to keep the series going today too. So we're going to take a look at our defense mechanisms through the lens of the Enneagram. And if you have no idea what the Enneagram is, it's a personality typology. It's basically for us just language to better understand ourselves and others. And I don't know about you, but there's been many times during this series when I feel very exposed. I'm sitting there and that like, oh, that hurts so bad. And I know that you felt it too because I can like hear everybody like audibly holding their breath like, oh, that's me. Oh, that's me. Yep, that's good. So today, if you have no idea what your Enneagram number type is, when I'm reading something and your stomach just like falls into your toes, that's you, okay? So what I want to do is talk about our defense mechanisms and the things that keep us from the life that God longs for us to have. Type 1s. Type 1s struggle with reaction formation. It says 1s use reaction formation to avoid anger and stay in control of their feelings and instincts in order to maintain a self-image of being right. Reaction formation is feeling one thing and then expressing the opposite, or at least something unrelated, such as feeling resentful but acting nice. My sister's laughing. She's like, I know, all the time. Feeling a need to rest but working harder. The relentless demand of the inner critic to be good and do good at all times replaces personal needs and shuts down feelings. Not only is my sister Corey a 1 on the Enneagram, my best friend Chelsea is a 1 on the Enneagram. And I read this to her, and her first thought was like, I need time to process this. Can I get back to you? Which is funny, because everybody I sent this to was like, I need time to process. And I'm like, what? You don't want me to just like expose your deepest fears and we can talk about it openly right now? And so I asked her, I said, what do you know about reaction formation? She's like, actually, I studied that for my LCSW exam. I was like, oh, great. So you know a lot. And this is what she said to me. She says, I use reaction formation to get what I want from people, including myself. Sounds manipulative, and in a way it is, but for me, it's to perhaps convince myself that I'm not actually as hurt, scared, or sad. I trick myself. If I want to feel happy or motivated about something, I'll just force myself until I get there. It's that idea of like faking it till you make it, right? And that's what 1s do. When 1s are feeling vulnerable, when they're feeling exposed, when their inner feelings don't align with how they think they're supposed to be on the outside, we just fake it until we make it. Push through. 2s, defense mechanism for Enneagram 2, the helper. Repression. 2s use repression of personal needs and feelings to avoid being needy and to maintain a self-image of being helpful. Repression is putting one's unacceptable feelings and impulses out of awareness by converting them into a more acceptable kind of emotional energy. Self-esteem depends on winning the approval of others. This can take the form of being overly nice, flattering people, and a superficial friendliness. Their genuine need for connection takes the form of you need me. And that is me. And here's the problem. When I read this, I was like, that's me. Like on a good day, I'm friendly, I'm outgoing, and I'm kind. And on a bad day, when I'm being manipulative, I'm friendly, and I'm outgoing, and I'm kind. And I'm like, I don't even know. Like, if any of the people that I've hugged in this room today, I don't know if it's real. I'm sorry. Like, I don't know if, like, this is, like, healthy me or this is me just, like, really working out some feelings. But, like, I cried. You guys, I read this, and I was like, I can't trust anything I do. Like, I don't even know if my motives are pure for anything. And it hit me so hard because I was like, what do I do with that? I repress things. I put them down. I don't acknowledge my own needs because that's how I protect myself. But then when I'm really healthy, I don't acknowledge my own needs because that's how I love others. And so it creates this conflict, this inner turmoil where I don't even know what to do with the wounds and the hurtings that I have. And to be honest, I don't even know what healthy would look like sometimes because I'm not sure if I am healthy or not. That's why you need family, because they will tell you right away, like, no, that was bad. Thank you, Dad. Whew. Thanks. Threes use identification. Threes use identification to avoid failure and maintain a self-image of being successful. Identification is stepping into a role so completely that threes lose contact with who they are inside. The pressure to keep up a winning image prevents access to personal feelings and needs. Attention goes to the external environment, the tasks to be done, the expectations of other people. Threes find it very difficult to drop the role or drop the image, since they get so much positive reinforcement in a society that values achievement and success. I think we have a lot of threes in America. A lot of threes that are moms. My mom's a 3. A lot of achievers that want to accomplish great things, but sometimes it's so easy to get so lost in that we play this role and we put on this image, and eventually we don't even know if that's the real us because we've just gotten so used to getting our validation from that thing. 4s. Introjection. 4s use introjection to avoid ordinariness and maintain a self-image of being authentic. Positive introjection is an attempt to overcome the feeling of deficiency by seeking value from an idealized experience, work, or relationship, and internalizing this through the emotional center. This also leads to negative introjection. 4s tend to blame themselves for whatever goes wrong in personal relationships. Their experience of loss or abandonment can take form inside as a self-rejecting voice, which leads to pervasive feelings of unworthiness. I don't think there's a single one of us in this room who at one point haven't felt unworthy. Haven't felt unworthy of love from God, haven't felt unworthy of love from others. But for 4s, this is like a constant daily battle. See, when 4s are confronted with their wounding and the hurt and the pain, their defense mechanism is to just convince themselves that that was the way they deserve to be treated, that they don't need anything else or anyone else. I asked Lauren Burgess, one of our amazing tech volunteers, she is a 4, and I asked her what her thoughts were on this, and she said, my first reaction to reading about my defense mechanisms is, oof. I was glad I could bring some joy yesterday to everybody's lives. I was like, what do you think about this? If I'm crying, you're crying. She says, it's always interesting to read something that reads true like this. You feel known, and yet it also shines a light on the dark parts of how you function, which can be real painful. The beauty comes when you can recognize those reactions in your own life. The knowing is powerful. You may not be able to ditch the mechanisms entirely, but seeing them for what they are is freeing and the beginning of a redemption process. I couldn't have said it better myself. See, there's this power that comes when light is shown and illuminates something, but it can be so incredibly painful, especially the longer that we've been in the dark. I don't know if you've ever had like a secret or something that you've held that eventually just like eats away at you. And you just keep waiting for the day when it's not going to be there, when you'll forget it. And maybe you do for a moment, but then it like creeps back in. And it's like there's this light that's just waiting to be illuminated, but there's a risk, right? There's a risk that comes. What if I expose this thing and the reaction that I get from people is negative? What if I let people in and then they just hurt me more? And they prove my point about what I already thought about that person or about the church or about these people in my life who can't be trusted. I'm going to go quickly through these last few. 5s use isolation to avoid the experience of inner emptiness and maintain a self-image of being knowledgeable. Isolation can be physical withdrawal from others, but it also means withdrawing on the inside from one's emotions and staying up in the head. Acquiring knowledge becomes a way to create safety and self-worth, but an overemphasis on the intellect prevents fives from connecting with the life force in their bodies and the support available in relationship with others. Sixes use projection to avoid rejection. It's not my problem, it's your problem. And to maintain a self-image of being loyal. Projection is a way of attributing to others what one cannot accept in oneself. Both positive and negative. Positive feelings are projected onto a romantic relationship or an external authority figure in order to assure safety and justify loyalty. Negative feelings are projected onto others to justify internal feelings of fear and distrust. Sixes support the projections by finding and amplifying the information which fits their premise. So Pastor Glenn is a 6. And I asked Pastor Glenn about his defense mechanism. And he told me a story about how when he was in high school and the girl that he was dating cheated on him with an upperclassman. And I was like, oh, heck no, who is she? We're going to look her up today. Everybody get out your phones, open up Facebook. I know we got enough millennials in here. We're going to find her and let her know what she missed out on, okay? We got you, Pastor Glenn. But see, what Pastor Glenn told me was that people actually told him that she was cheating on him. But he didn't believe it till he saw it for himself. I have done that. I have had friends say, hey, you know what's going on? And I'm like, nope, definitely not happening. And they're like, you know you can see it, right? And I'm like, I see nothing. I don't know what you're talking about, right? They're like, hey, you know that this is wrong, right? This is unhealthy. This is not what you should be doing. And I'm like, you're not what you should be doing, okay? You know, you're wrong. Like, you don't even know me. Like, we all use projection when we start to feel insecure. It's their problem, right? Your problem, not my problem. Because actually turning an introspective eye on ourselves and allowing that light to creep in, man, that is painful. You know that verse where it talks about, hey, before you go pull out that like speck in somebody else's eye, deal with that plank in your own? I just like to take my plank and knock everybody down around me so nobody's looking at me. And then they can't judge me anymore. Man, it's easy to project our insecurities and our fears on others. It's hard to take a chance and let them prove you wrong. Sevens use rationalization to avoid suffering and to maintain a self-image of being okay. Rationalization is a way of staying in the head, explaining away or justifying things in order to distance from painful feelings and refuse to take responsibility for their behavior. Everything can be reframed towards the positive. Their ability to think of new options and possibilities allows sevens to leave the present moment with its limitations and live in a seemingly unlimited future. Aside from my dad, one of my favorite sevens is Sarah Whitmer, and she said, we just choose to hope for the best, navigate around doubt, and have a it'll work out in the long run mentality. And I was like, you go, girl. Like, yeah, that is such an incredible outlook on life. We need sevens. We need sevens to be like, dude, it's gonna be okay. Let's go get some ice cream. It's gonna be fine. Don't worry about it. But also, when you got real things going on in your life, sometimes you need to worry about it, right? You need to do something about it. I mean, ice cream fixes most things, not everything. No, that's not true. Ice cream does fix everything. But we could eat ice cream and talk about our real problems, right? Eights use denial to avoid vulnerability and to maintain a self-image of being strong. Denial means to power up in the body center and forcefully redirect energy and attention through willfulness and control. Vulnerable feelings are automatically put away and not experienced. Emotional energy is reduced while instinctual energy is increased. Receptivity necessarily involves some vulnerability. So eights seek to impact the world and other people rather than be receptive to them. I asked Taylor Dwyer, my favorite eight, and I was like, Taylor, what do you think about this? He goes, let me get back to you. Never heard from him again. I was like, great job, Taylor. He's like, I'll be vulnerable tomorrow. I'm like, dude, I'm giving my talk. It's already done. He's like, oh, sorry, I missed it, you know. It is so incredibly easy to just redirect energy. Especially for me, I'm not an 8, but when I'm unhealthy, I become more like an 8. And it's so easy to redirect my unhealthy energy onto somebody else. Hey, you've got problems that you should go fix. Right? Looking at my husband like, you left your toothbrush out. And he's like, the whole house is full of your stuff. I'm like, that doesn't matter. Your toothbrush out. This is a house of order. As I'm like kicking my clothes under the bed. I'm like, it's easy to redirect those things instead of actually confronting them. And the way that 9s do this is through narcotization. 9s use narcotization to avoid conflict and to maintain a self-image of being comfortable or harmonious. Narcotization is using food and drink, entertainment, or simply repetitive patterns of thinking and doing to put oneself to sleep. Even productive activities can keep 9s narcotized if they become too habitual. Avoiding conflict with others keeps 9s from being fully present in relationships. Avoiding internal conflict leads to inertia and self-forgetting. See, I just keep thinking about our defense mechanisms, about all these small choices that we make, most of us probably subconsciously. Because this is how we're wired in our DNA to respond when we feel threatened and when we feel vulnerable. But I think about the fact that like this fish, this flounder, it's not like one day he woke up and his eye was just on the other side of his head. It's a pattern, and it's a pattern of behavior, and it's a pattern of avoidance and a pattern of denial that when we participate in habitually over and over and over time, it slowly changes us. And one day we wake up and we don't even recognize ourselves anymore. I think this is what James is talking about. When he's talking about the tongue, he says, as a tongue. So it's a simile. So it's a metaphor. It's a comparison of two things. And what I think he's doing is he's talking about the tongue as a comparison for any small thing that can impact the larger whole. He says this in James 3-5. He says, we put the bits in the mouths of horses to make them obey us. We can turn the whole animal. A bit is like this big. He says, or take ships as an example. Although they are so large and are driven by strong winds, they are steered by a very small rudder wherever the pilot wants to go. Likewise, the tongue is a small part of the body, but it makes great boasts. Consider what a great forest is set on fire by a small spark. When I break this metaphor down, I think there's 3 types of behaviors that I'm going to talk through quickly to wrap it up. 3 types of things that have the power to control us if we let them. The first thing is the bit. If you've ever been horseback riding, the bit is a little metal thing that they sit on the tongue of the horse. And what happens is when you pull it, the horse turns to the left or the right when you pull on the reins. If you pull back, it actually stops. And so I see this type of behavior as the things that check us, that stop us in our tracks. There are patterns of behavior that we engage in where when we do this, there's a little check in our spirit, that Holy Spirit, that conscience, that Jiminy Cricket that says, I wouldn't do that. And you stop. For me, this is guilt. I feel bad. I'm like, oh, I probably shouldn't have said that. And it stops me in my tracks. But here's the thing about a bit. If you pull too long on a horse, the horse will actually go backwards. It doesn't just stop, it goes backwards. And I think this is what happens when we sit in those things like guilt. The guilt turns into something like shame. And now all of a sudden, this beautiful thing that the Holy Spirit gave us to let us know, hey, you're off course. You need to stop. We stop, but then we sit in it for too long, and it actually pushes us backwards. The second thing is the rudder. See, unlike the bit, the rudder actually moves you forward. In a ship, you're almost always moving forward. And when you move a rudder, if you've ever tried to steer a boat, you turn it barely at all, and you're like doing circles. You know, you're like, oh my gosh, I was not planning on going this way. Okay, yeah, I wanted to do that. Hello. So like the Little Mermaid, you know, kiss the girl. Look, a flounder. But see, sometimes we get fooled because the thing about the rudder is it looks like you're making progress, but you make these slow changes over time. And before you know it, you're way off course. And you can't even see it. It's not even perceptible because it's so easy to just a little here, a little here, a little here, and a little here, and we get lost. Because unlike the bit that actually stops us and pushes us back, when we have those things that get us just slightly off course, we can feel like we're making progress. The last thing is the spark. See, the spark is this thing that's good. It brings you warmth. It brings you comfort. But without boundaries, it becomes all-consuming. Valentine's Day, my mom, an angel of a woman, was like, we're going to do this like beautiful Valentine's Day dinner, and she gave us all little candles at our tables. Little candles in front of your plate, which is really good when you're my sister Corey and you've got these awesome bangs. And Corey bends down to inspect her plate, and her bangs catch fire. And I'm like, now it's a party. Woo, yeah. So there's no longer candles allowed at the table. But see, like, sparks can be good. On the stove, it heats your food, and in the hearth, it warms your house. But in the backyard, in my trees, that thing is burning it down, right? That is not where we want. And I think about sparks as things like passion. Passion, in the right context, is incredible. It fuels our marriages. It fuels our occupations. It fuels our desire to see this world change, to become better. But passion in the wrong context leads to greed. Passion in the wrong context leads to lust. Passion in the wrong context leads to rage. To all these unhealthy things. But instead of learning how to control the bit, how to respond, how to not move the rudder so far, how to contain the spark, we become overwhelmed and we just shut it down. We throw the bit out, get rid of the rudder, douse the spark completely. See, I spent a lot of my life trying to deny those things in me that I didn't like, that I felt were controlling me because I didn't understand them. I wasn't afraid to illuminate any part of my life, but I was afraid to illuminate things that I didn't understand, that I didn't see a way out. I didn't know how I was going to actually get to where I wanted to go. And so I just denied him, and I pushed him down, and I ignored him, and I pushed him to the side, and I did that thing where I was like, someday we'll figure it out. But later in James 3:12, he says, my brothers and sisters, can a fig tree bear olives, or a grapevine bear figs? Neither can a salt spring produce fresh water. See, we can't run from who we are. We cannot change who we are, and sometimes we're just a weird fish lying on the bottom of the ocean with two eyes on the side of our head. And we have a choice to make. We can continue in that pattern of behavior. Just go, you know what, I might as well just stay this way. I've gotten comfortable, it works, like I might as well just stay where I am. Or we can decide that, you know what, I don't actually think that this is how I want to live. And we can get up off of the ocean floor. And who knows, maybe if the fish was up long enough, that I might go back on the other side of the head. I don't know. But I do know that we serve a God who can do the miraculous. And when he says in 2 Corinthians, anyone who is in Christ is a new creation. The old is gone and the new has come. What that tells me is that when he said, hey, whatever you bring into the light, not only does that become a light, but through that process, I'm going to make you new. Through that process, I'm going to take the old, and I'm not just going to like revamp it and transform it and make it into something that looks new. He says, I'm going to make it new. But you cannot be discouraged if that process takes time. That eye did not pop over in one day, and it's not going to pop back in one day. It takes time, and what we have to do is be gracious with ourselves during that time. Just because you don't see God moving as quick as you want does not mean he is not moving. Change can happen in a moment, but that transformation of ourselves can take some time. 7 years ago in September, we were going to get a new building, and Derek gave us a challenge to raise $1,000, and I had one thing I knew I could give up, and I told my parents, hey, I'm going to quit smoking. You're going to give me $1,000. My dad pulled out his checkbook, like right there. I was like, I should ask for 10. Should ask for 10 grand. One to the church, that's 10%. I'll take the other 9. But I had this really cool app, and it tracked with me, and it said, hey, in 2 weeks, you're gonna get your taste buds back. And I was like, my taste buds are gone? Like, I didn't even know. And he says, hey, in 4 months, you're gonna get your sense of smell fully back. And I was like, oh, dope. Like, I like to smell things. And it said, hey, in 7 years, your lungs are gonna be as if you had never smoked at all. And I was like, 7 years? Like, that's a long time. But hey, guess what? 7 years came. And that decision that I made a long time ago, it was a one-time decision. I decided in that moment to change, but it took me 7 years to be made new, for my cells to regenerate. So I want you to bow your heads and close your eyes, and I want to pray for you this morning. If you're here and you're in that process of transformation, you know that you've been on the floor for too long, and you're just crying out saying, God, I just need to get off this ocean floor. I just need to know that it's possible that I could do something different. If that's you, if you would just raise your hand, I want to pray with you this morning. I see you. That's amazing. It's amazing. Thank you. And if you're here this morning, and maybe you got up off the ocean floor, but that transformation of moving the old you into the new you feels tiring. You're not seeing maybe the progress as quickly as you want. You're not seeing God's redemption in your life as quickly as maybe you want. If that's you, I would love for you to raise your hand so I can pray for you. Oh, God, you see all the hands that are here this morning. God, and I just ask, like as we sang earlier, Lord, for a move of your spirit, a move of your presence. God, as we sang, we're not enough unless you come. God, we can't change ourselves. If we could, we would be the most amazing, incredible, wonderful people. But God, we are a room of broken, hurting people who on our best day are just trying to be kind to others. God, and just let people know that they're not alone. And so we just ask for a move of your spirit, a move of your presence this morning.
You are listening to the Makers Church podcast. For more information about our community, please visit makerschurch.org.